Are you saying yes and then cancelling at the last minute because you really wanted to say no in the first place? It's about time you stopped wasting your time and everybody else's. This podcast will show you how to mean what you say. Imagine saying no and feeling guilt-free. Here's how. What is people-pleasing really costing you? It may be hard to hear the truth, but here's how and why you can no longer afford to do it. Have you ever felt guilty for saying no to something? This podcast is for you.
Welcome to Life by 8, your blueprint for living the most extraordinary life. I am Rebecca Grugan, your life architect on this journey to designing your ultimate life. If you are ready to level up using values levels, understanding yourself with the energetic blueprint, our 8 pillars to human wellness framework, this is for you. You are in the right place, so let's go.
So welcome to today's episode where we are going to dive into a topic that affects many of us and often in ways we don't fully recognize or are conscious to. And this is the reasons why we say yes, even when we don't want to, and why saying no can feel challenging. So if you've ever found yourself overcommitting, people-pleasing, or struggling to set boundaries, then this episode is for you. You see, saying yes seems simple, right? It's often easier, less confrontational, and makes people happy. But underneath that yes is sometimes a complex web of emotions, social conditioning, and fears that keep us from confidently saying no. And so in today's episode, we're going to unpack why we say yes and explore what's stopping us from saying no. So let's get started. Have you ever found yourself saying yes to an invitation to an event that you know you don't want to go to, and then a day before or the day of or the week leading into it, you then tell the host some type of excuse so that you don't have to go and to get out of it? Yes, I am talking to you. Let's work out why. Let's start by exploring why we tend to say yes so easily, so readily. And on the surface, saying yes, it can feel good. It's a way to connect, to be helpful, and it avoids conflict, whether that conflict is with somebody else or internal. But there is a psychological element here too. You see, many of us are conditioned from a young age to be agreeable, to prioritize others, and to seek approval. Did you even know that in sales, there is a thing that is all about getting you to say yes? Yes, it's called the yes set. And this can make yes, it's our default response. And there's also something known as the social approval bias, which means that we have a natural tendency to conform to what's expected of us because we want to be liked and accepted. And this bias can lead us to say yes to things we don't want to do, simply because we want to avoid disappointing others. And so remember that time where you said yes to the thing you didn't want to do? Think about what was driving that decision. Was it a desire to avoid conflict or the need for approval from that person or their friends? What had you saying yes to something you wanted to say no to? Because if saying yes comes easily, saying no can feel like a monumental task. And one of the main reasons we struggle to say no is fear. We fear letting people down. We fear confrontation. And we fear being perceived as selfish or rude. And this fear is often rooted in a belief that saying no will lead to negative consequences like rejection or criticism. And if we want to talk about evolution, if you're rejected, rejection can equal death. When you're a herd and you go out there searching for food, if you are rejected by the tribe, you're likely to be the one who gets eaten by the lion. Yeah, that's how serious rejection can be felt by people. And so where does this fear come from? For many, it is tied to your past experiences and or cultural conditioning. So if you grew up in an environment where you were taught to put others first, or where your worth was measured by how helpful you were, saying no can feel like an act of rebellion. For those of you with teenagers, They may be saying no simply to rebel. However, as we grow up, saying no can trigger guilt or anxiety, making it feel almost impossible to set any boundaries. And so when we created the technology culture we have where we DM and text each other, it is a lot easier now to send the excuse later to text it instead of say it out loud or to the person in their face. And so if you fear saying no, you ask yourself, what do you fear will happen if you say no? Are these fears based on real experiences, or are they rooted in assumptions or outdated beliefs? I had a client who was somebody who would say yes when they want to say no. And then the day of, or the days leading up to the event, they would have this really, really long excuse of why they could no longer go. And for those of you who have children, I know that many of you have used your children as an excuse to get out of the thing that you don't want to go to. And yes, this may have become, and this is my own belief anecdotally, is that it's become a cultural norm now. For we don't RSVP on time, we hold off until the last minute just in case, well, for lots of different reasons. For some people, it's in case we get a better offer. For some people, it's because they never wanted to go in the first place. They said yes, and then they need the excuse to get out of. Like, there was a bride who was, and I'm sure there's more to the story, but people didn't RSVP in time, and so she followed up on them individually, and people had said yes, we're coming, and then she didn't know, but then she was walking down the aisle, 10% of her guests were there. And when she went back to look at her phone that morning, there was all these people with excuses as to why they weren't coming. Now, I'm sure there's more to that. But the point I'm making is, imagine walking down the aisle at your wedding and the people who had said yes were no longer there. Not only does it cost you money, but the feeling or the lack of respect, the just attitude that we now have for family and friends and people we're close to, not even just acquaintances. People who call in sick to work, the policy is that you're meant to call, but it's easier to text, I'm sick. It's a lot easier to text it, feeling less consequence than if you verbally have to say it out loud to someone. These are things that are now becoming cultural norms, and it is affecting relationships. And unconsciously or consciously, it is affecting how you feel about yourself. There is a cost if you are somebody who is always saying yes. And I'll come back to the client who used to say yes to everything and then pull out. Because the cost to always saying yes, even though it might seem harmless, there is a cost to always being agreeable. When we overcommit and stretch ourselves too thin, we risk burnout, resentment, and even a loss of who we are, of self-identity. Constantly saying yes to others means that you're saying no to your own needs. And over time, this can lead to a sense of overwhelm and disconnection from our own goals and values. Like, think about it. Think about the energy it takes to keep up with all of those yeses. Every time you say yes to something that doesn't serve you or your goals, you're giving away a little bit of your time, energy, and focus. And where you focus your energy, where energy goes, energy flows. And so if that's consistently away from you, that is why, if you're somebody who always says yes, you may feel drained. And while in the moment it might not seem significant, it adds up over time, leaving you feeling drained and empty and possibly even resentful. And resentment as an emotion is destructive. So consider the impact of your yes habit. What are you sacrificing in order to please others? And how does that impact your overall well-being? When you can understand your motivations to saying yes, this is how you gain control over it. And understanding your motivations is important because knowing why you're saying yes, it helps you start to realign with who you are, who you want to be, and what you genuinely want. Because if you could be, and you might be, saying yes out of obligation, guilt, or fear, then how is that constructive for you and the friendships and relationships you're in? Because when you start noticing these patterns in your responses, you'll start to notice if you're saying yes to avoid conflict or saying yes to get approval from others, or because you have FOMO, fear of missing out. It can be helpful to create a yes inventory, if you want to call it that. So for 1 week, track everything you say yes to and ask yourself why. So I said yes to this. Why did I say yes? And by the end of the week, you'll have a clearer picture of what might be driving your decisions and where you might want to start setting those boundaries. When we just get an invitation and we say yes straight away without thinking, that's what I'm getting at. So RSVPs exist for a reason, and it is important to adhere to them. That's me talking to myself as much as I am to you. But the respect for others around us. And so when we get an invitation, being able to run that through a filter, because you all have an unconscious filter. You have the data. What does it feel like for you? For what purpose would you attend? For what purpose do you not want to attend? What does it mean you have to sacrifice if you were to do that? And let that be, have time, make time before you respond. And know why you are responding with yes. The people or the person involved, are you saying yes because you are worried that they will reject you? Are you saying yes because you feel like you are going to miss out and you won't be in the cool group if you don't go? Are you saying yes because you're scared of being bored because you have nothing else on that day? Are you saying yes because you grew up, with people always saying no to you, so you say yes to everybody because you don't want to let anybody down? People pleasing is actually selfish because you're doing it. You're saying yes. You're pleasing others because you want something in return. You want that validation. So starting to get really clear as to why you're saying yes and running it through a filter on your own terms is super powerful in transitioning to actually saying what you mean and doing what you say you'll do. And so being able to say yes and also say no without guilt comes with honesty. So instead of saying yes straight away, like my client, and then coming up with an excuse that's usually untrue, or you've manifested it, coming up with your excuse to get out of it at the last minute, and then feeling that guilt or shame for doing that, because you are unconsciously, you are not being honest, which means that you are not being you. Allowing yourself to let go of that guilt requires you to be honest from the beginning. And so say you get an invitation to a hen's night and you genuinely don't want to go because you would rather spend that time with your family or your children or whatever it is. But you say yes because you feel obliged to, because you don't want to let somebody down. And so you say yes, and then just before it, you've paid for the accommodation, you paid for whatever, but then you come up with an excuse, your child's sick, you've got to be there, you've got to work, whatever it is. And then you feel guilty. Not only have you got then to carry the feeling of guilt, because you have let people down, but you've also used monetary resources in this example, for instance. But what if you got the invitation, you knew you didn't want to go, and instead of saying yes and the excuse later, what if you just said, thank you so much for the invitation. I won't be there, but I look forward to hearing all about it at the wedding. That's it. What if you just said that? No excuses, no long explanations as to why not. What if you just said that? Feel it. Feel the difference. Because it's a massive difference. Because when you can start to say no to things, guilt-free, this is where you start to feel empowered and where you start to align yourself with who you are and create a life that you want. Because it's daunting saying no, but there are ways to do it, as I've just given you the example of, and you can do that without guilt. And so reframing no as an act of self-respect and self-care can help you use no on how to set the boundary that protects your time and energy. So for many of you who may be in leadership roles or have your own businesses, you might have people in your life who are like, have you got time for a coffee? I just want to pick your brain. And Alex Hormozy talks into this really, really well in regards to his boundaries. And look, I'm not sure if I do it the way he did it, but he uses an example of like somebody asked him this question, like, have you got time for a coffee? I'd like to pick your brains. And he literally brought up his calendar in front of the person, which was empty, by the way. And he goes, see how that? No, I don't have the time for that. Now, that's a little bit full on. But the thing is, what he was saying is that he had made his calendar free for a reason, because he needs that time to be with his wife or to create, to go back to self. And so if you don't respect your time and energy, why do you expect anybody else to? Especially, and for those of you who are coaches or consultants or lead other people, if you are giving your time away for free to all these people, but you have clients who are paying for your time, can you see how that doesn't align within who you are and in your own boundaries? And setting those boundaries, it's not selfish. It's actually necessary. Because to live in true alignment for who you are, you need to show up as you are in all the ways. And so I want to give you a few practical tips for saying no more comfortably. Being clear and direct. So as I gave you the example before, instead of over-explaining, you could simply say, no, I'm not able to do it. I'm not able to do that. You don't actually owe anyone a lengthy excuse. You are doing it because of the feelings you are having with saying no. So you're saying no because blah, 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 to try to justify the guilt that you're feeling for saying no. And that guilt about putting yourself first. But you don't actually need that. And for a lot of people, you actually end up wasting their time with those lengthy excuses. And so yes, it's become a societal norm and a trait, but it doesn't mean it's a healthy one for our relationships, our friendships, our interactions and connections with other people. Be clear, concise, mean what you say, and also use I statements. So frame it as your decision. So don't blame your husband. I've seen the reels where people are like, husbands are like blaming their wives for the fact that they can't go on a golf trip, even though they didn't want to go on a golf trip because they wanted to eat Cheetos and watch Netflix with their wife, but they're blaming their wife for not being able to go. Or wives blaming their husbands for not letting them go. And do you understand that those excuses that you think in the moment aren't harmful, what that can actually then mean for how people view your partner? And they think your partner's controlling you, or that you're under the thumb, which is a joke, or the whole ball and chain that comes with marriage and long-term relationships. We're literally perpetuating that narrative, that story, by using our partners as the excuse to get out of something. People do it in sales. I've got to talk to the husband. That can be true. And it should be respected at times by the person who's selling to you or that you're speaking. But if you're using it as an excuse, know that it is having a longer term impact on your relationships with these people and how they're viewing your relationship. Be honest, be open. Use the I statement. I'm focusing on my priorities right now, so I won't be able to take this on. I really feel like I want to have the time for myself, so I won't be able to be at your baby shower. I know some of you have heard me talk about how I feel about baby showers, but you don't have to go into full detail. Start doing what you want. And if the invitation or the thing you've been asked to do is not what you want to do, sometimes you can offer an alternative if you want. So if you feel inclined, you can offer an alternative or suggest something to someone who might be able to help. So, you might not be able to or might not want to take on that client at the time, but do you have somebody in your network who can serve them really well and that you think might be able to help? Or in the workplace, you might be continually, because you've always said yes your whole life and you're trying to put boundaries in and change, it might be that you have to say no to something, but there may be somebody else that can help them or do that work and it helps them get a new skill set, whatever it is. Sometimes offer an alternative if it's with a friend who wants to go to the movies, but you really don't want to go out then, but you'd love to spend time with them, then offer the fact that you can have popcorn and be at one of your houses watching movies in your pajamas. Like, it doesn't have to be black or white, but it never also has to just be yes. And it never has to just always be no. Start to get to know yourself and give alternatives if that is something that you want to do. And sometimes, like everything, like any new skill, you have to practice. So saying no, it actually becomes easier when you practice it. So you can start with small things and work your way up. I guess think about one area in your life where you've been saying yes too often and a lot, and how can you start practicing saying no in that area? And what boundaries would help you feel more, balanced? I'll give you a really basic example. So if you're somebody who is wanting to cut back drinking alcohol as much as you might be, and especially at this at time of recording, we're going into the Christmas season, maybe you don't want to be drinking alcohol at all, but maybe just less. And so you can start to practice no when you are offered a drink. And sometimes, dependent on your addiction level or your need for alcohol in social situations, driving gives you the reason as to why you're not drinking. So you can practice saying no to your friends and saying no to people when it comes to being offered a drink. When you are, being asked to go out for dinner or to go to these parties and you're looking at a menu, it might be just starting practicing by saying no to something. So if you're wanting to eat healthier, you might get the meal, but you don't eat the hot chips. So you say no to the side meal or no to the entree or no to the dessert as a way to start practicing what it feels like to say no. Because the thing is that when you say no and you are choosing you will start to feel that within you. You will start to feel more empowered and you'll start to trust yourself again. And self-trust and self-respect, they are two fundamental things that we need more of, especially women, because so many women are saying yes because of the cultural expectations that women will just do what they're asked. They do what they're told. It's time to stop doing what you're told and to actually start doing what you want. Now, for those of you who are like, I'm only ever going to do what I want, no, there are still things in your life that you have to do, even though you don't want to do them, i.e. the dishes, or taking your children to school, or putting them to bed, or brushing your teeth. These are still things that you need to do, even if you might not want to. So I'm just disclaimer there, because it's not about only doing the things that you want. This is about the yes and the no, and how you reclaim your time, how you reclaim your energy by creating these boundaries. When you begin to say no more often, you are reclaiming your time and your energy. And this is going to seem hypocritical by the end of this episode, but it will make sense, is that these boundaries that you're setting by saying no, they are essential for maintaining your healthy relationships with others and with yourself. And by saying no, you're not just rejecting a task or a request from somebody. You are honoring your own needs and priorities. Now, that's if you're not swinging the complete opposite to saying no to everything and isolating yourself. And for those who are parents, if you're just saying no to your children on everything because you're too tired to do anything, that's a whole different ballgame. But this is for those of you who are saying yes when you want to say no, and then coming up with excuses and then feeling the guilt and the shame that comes with that. That's all energy leaking. You're wasting your own energy and those of others. But sometimes people are swinging to say no to everything. And so then their goal is to actually say yes to things that may seem risky. Right? So that's what I mean about the polarity, the dichotomy, when the pendulum swings that way. But this is specifically around those of you who are saying yes when you know you want to say no. And so I wonder if you can imagine what it would actually feel like to have more time. Because time is the one thing that you can't get back. It is yes, it's a human construct, and dependent on your belief system, time's not real, and past, present, future, and blah, 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 blah. But realistically, in this 3D reality, time is all you have. And so I wonder if you had more time to focus on what you want, what truly matters to you. Think of all the projects and the hobbies or the restful moments that you could reclaim, that you could make yours, because your time is yours. And setting those boundaries, it can empower you to live a life that actually aligns with your values rather than constantly reacting to the demands of others. And as you think about your boundaries, ask yourself, what would I do with my time if I stopped saying yes to things that drain me? What could you accomplish if you actually invested that energy back into your own goals? And what would it mean for you if you could say no and mean it, and know that you can say no without hurting people's feelings? Because the thing is that if you are doing it respectfully and you are being, I guess, manipulated, or situations have been created where people are blaming you for things, even though you said no respectfully, then sometimes it gets to a point of needing to let go of them. But the thing is that a lot of the times that I work with clients on this specific issue is that they actually start to inspire the people around them, because people pleasers tend to attract people pleasers, and they'll just go in cycles of saying yes when everybody wants to say no, and they'll just perpetuate that cycle. So many of us are saying the yes as a way to maintain harmony and pleasing others around us. But this habit, look, it erodes our authenticity, especially if we are lying about it later, if we're turning the yes into a no. When we say yes to things that we don't want to do, we're not being true to ourselves. And over time, that can damage our self-esteem and resentment. Resentment can destroy and be so destructive of self and of the relationships around us. Because even if you think you're not feeling it, even if you think you're not saying it and you're hiding it, people can feel it energetically. So it's important for you to start letting go of these people-pleasing moments, these traits, because it doesn't mean that you stop caring about others. It actually means that you start valuing your own needs as much as you value theirs. So when you say no, you are choosing authenticity over approval. And this ultimately leads to healthier and more honest relationships. And is that not what most people want, if not all, want in their lives? Is healthy, honest relationships where they can belong and where they can show up fully as themselves? Because that's where true freedom is. And so saying no, embracing this power, it is a skill, and like any skill, you're going to practice it. And the more that you say no, the more confident and empowered you're going to feel. And so remember, every no is a yes to something that matters more to you. I'll repeat that. Every no is a yes to something that matters more. And so you're giving yourself permission to focus on what truly aligns with your goals, with your values. And so be honest with yourself. How often are you saying yes when you want to say no? And what do you need to practice so that you can be more you? So as we wrap up, I challenge you to pay attention to your yeses this week, to practice saying no where it feels right, and notice the freedom and relief that comes with it. Because over time, you'll build the confidence to honor your boundaries and to create a life that actually feels true to you. And so like my client who learnt the power of this skill, where it completely transformed not only her relationships or how the people that she connected with, but her relationships with her children, because she was no longer using them as an excuse. And I know that I talk about the ripple effect, and that is the ripple effect when you start being authentic and honest. The energy goes where you focus it. So where do you want more yes, and where do you want to say no? And so if today's episode has resonated with you, consider sharing it with someone who you might benefit, who you think might benefit from, I guess, a little boundary setting inspiration. And that remember, every time you say no to what drains you, you are saying yes to what fulfills you. And until next time, take care of yourselves and your precious time, because that's all that we really have. And thank you for your time.